The night my wife found my affair messages on our tablet, she told me to pack a bag while our 4-year-old son stood in the hallway clutching his dinosaur. I thought losing the house was the punishment. Then her father slid a custody agreement across his desk. I used to believe a man could outrun his past if he worked hard enough, that if he put on the right suit, bought the right house, married the right woman, and learned how to shake hands with men who never had to worry about rent, he could become someone new, someone better, someone safe. For a while, I thought I had done exactly that. My name is Daniel Mercer. I was 35 years old when I nearly burned my life to the ground. By most people's standards, I had made it. I had a 4-bedroom house in a quiet suburb outside Nashville, a black SUV in the driveway, and a 6-figure job in commercial real estate. I had a wife named Claire, who looked like she belonged in a Southern living spread. Graceful, smart, polished, the kind of woman who remembered birthdays, wrote thank you notes, and never left the house without looking put together. And we had a son, Eli, 4 years old, with my stubborn chin and his mother's soft blue eyes. He loved dinosaurs, pancakes, and sitting on my shoulders while I walked him around the backyard like he was king of the world. That boy was the best part of me. And still, I nearly shattered his world because I convinced myself I was lonely, because I convinced myself I deserved to feel alive. Because one Tuesday afternoon, at a gas station off Franklin Road, I saw the woman I had loved before I became the man everyone admired. Her name was Marissa, and the moment I saw her, I forgot every promise I had ever made. It was one of those humid Tennessee afternoons where the air feels heavy enough to lean on. I had just left a meeting with a developer downtown, and I stopped for gas because my tank was nearly empty. I was standing there with one hand on the pump, scrolling through emails on my phone when I heard a voice behind me. "Well, look who got expensive," I froze. I knew that voice before I turned around. Some voices stay in your bones. Marissa stood beside a red Honda with a dented bumper and sunglasses pushed up in her dark hair. She wore jeans, a white tank top, and that same half-smile I remembered from when we were 22 and broke and convinced the world owed us something. She looked older, of course. We both did, but not in a bad way. There was confidence in her now, a sharpness, a heat that hadn't faded. "Marissa," I said. She looked me up and down slowly enough that I felt it. "Daniel Mercer," she said. "Never thought I'd see you in a shirt that costs more than my car payment." I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. And just like that, 10 years disappeared. We had grown up 2 neighborhoods apart on the east side of Nashville. Same cracked sidewalks, same sirens at night. Same schools where kids learned early which dreams were practical and which ones got laughed out of the room. Marissa and I understood each other in a way most people never had. We were both hungry back then, not just for money, but for proof. Proof that where we started didn't decide where we ended up. We dated for almost 3 years in our 20s. It was messy, intense, passionate, and exhausting. We broke up because I wanted order and she wanted freedom. Or maybe because we were too much alike and too immature to love each other without turning everything into a war. After the breakup, I buried myself in work. She disappeared from my life, until that gas station. "How have you been?" I asked. "Still breathing," she said. "That counts, right?" I smiled. "Most days," her eyes flicked to my left hand. "Married," she said. I looked down at my wedding ring like I'd forgotten it was there. "Yeah," I said. 3 years. Kids. 1. A little boy. Something softened in her face for half a second. Then the smile came back. "Good for you, Danny." Nobody called me Danny anymore. Claire called me Daniel. My coworkers called me Mercer. My in-laws called me Dan when they were trying to sound casual. But Marissa said Danny like she still knew the kid under the suit. And I hate to admit this, but it felt good. Too good. We stood there longer than we should have. People came and went around us. Pumps clicked. Cars pulled out. The world kept moving, but I felt like I was standing inside an old photograph. Before she left, she tilted her head. "You still have the same number?" I should have said no. I should have wished her well and gone home to my wife and son. Instead, I said, "Yeah, same number." She smiled like she already knew. "Maybe I'll use it." That night, Claire was in the kitchen when I got home, wearing leggings and one of my old Vanderbilt sweatshirts. Eli sat at the island eating macaroni and cheese, holding a plastic T-Rex in one hand. "Daddy!" he yelled, cheese on his chin. I scooped him up and kissed his cheek. Claire smiled at me. "Long day?" "Yeah," I said. "Meetings ran late." That was the first lie. Not a big one, not yet, but lies are like cracks in glass. At first, they're thin enough to ignore. Then one day, the whole thing shatters in your hands. Claire had made chicken, green beans, and rice. She asked about my meeting. I answered. She told me about Eli refusing to nap and how her mother had called to remind us about Sunday dinner. It was ordinary, safe, peaceful, and while my wife talked, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't look at it until later, after Eli's bath, after we read Goodnight Moon twice, after Claire kissed me lightly and said she was exhausted, after she turned away in bed, pulling the covers to her shoulder. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling. Then I picked up my phone. The message was from an unknown number. "Still wearing fancy shirts, Danny?" I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed back, "Only when I'm pretending to be respectable." The reply came almost instantly. "You were never that respectable." I smiled in the dark. That was how it started. A joke. A memory. A spark. Nothing dangerous, I told myself. Just two people catching up. But deep down, I knew better. I loved Claire. That's the part people don't always understand about betrayal. It doesn't always begin with hatred. Sometimes it begins in the quiet spaces where love has gone unattended. Claire was kind, loyal, a wonderful mother. But somewhere after the wedding, after the mortgage, after sleepless nights with a newborn and my 70-hour work weeks, we stopped reaching for each other. At first, I blamed stress, then routine, then parenthood. Eventually, I blamed her. She was tired all the time. She didn't seem to want me the way she had when we first dated. If I touched her, she stiffened or sighed or said, "Not tonight, Daniel. I'm sorry." After a while, I stopped trying. But I didn't stop wanting. That was the resentment I carried around like a loaded gun. I told myself I had done everything right. Worked hard, provided, stayed faithful, came home every night, put my family first. So why did I feel invisible in my own marriage? Why did my wife look through me like I was another piece of furniture in the house? I never asked her that in a real way. Not calmly. Not honestly. Instead, I let silence grow between us, and I watered it with pride. Marissa's texts filled that silence. She remembered things Claire didn't know. The cheap apartment where my heat barely worked. The nights I ate ramen and swore I'd own a house someday. The old pickup truck that died every other week. The scar on my right shoulder from a job site accident when I was 19. With Marissa, I didn't have to explain who I used to be. She knew. And she made it clear she missed him. One night, after a week of texting, she wrote, "You ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't blown everything up?" I should have put the phone down. Instead, I answered, "Sometimes." A minute later, she wrote, "Me too." That was the moment I crossed a line in my heart, even if my body hadn't caught up yet. 2 weeks after I ran into Marissa, I told Claire I had a late meeting. I said it while standing in our bedroom, knotting my tie with shaking hands. Claire sat on the edge of the bed folding Eli's little dinosaur pajamas. "Again?" she asked. There was an accusation in her voice, just exhaustion. "Yeah," I said. "Big account. I can't miss it," she nodded. I waited for her to ask more, to look at me closely, to see the guilt already written all over my face. But she didn't. She just folded the pajamas and said, "Okay, drive safe." Something about that made me angry. Not because she suspected me, because she didn't. Because my wife trusted me so completely that it made my betrayal feel even uglier. I kissed Eli before I left. He wrapped his arms around my neck. Will you be home for bedtime? He asked. Probably not, buddy, I said. His face fell. I still left. That is the part I will never forgive myself for completely. Not the affair first. That. The little boy in dinosaur pajamas asking for one more bedtime story, and me choosing myself. Marissa lived in an apartment complex on the edge of town, not far from where we both grew up. The building was clean but old, with uneven stairs and yellow porch lights that attracted moths. When she opened the door, all the years between us vanished again. "Hi, Danny," she said. I should have turned around. I didn't. Inside, her apartment smelled like vanilla candles and rain. There were half-unpacked boxes in the corner, a stack of books on the coffee table, and music playing low from a speaker near the kitchen. We talked at first, about work, about her life, about mine, though I avoided saying Claire's name. Marissa noticed. "You don't have to pretend with me," she said. "I'm not pretending." She gave me a sad little smile. "You always were, Danny. That was your talent." Those words landed hard because they were true. I had spent years building a life so different from where I came from that sometimes I felt like a guest in it. Claire's family had money, real money. Her father owned car dealerships across 3 counties. Her mother chaired charity luncheons and used the word summer as a verb. They were never cruel to me, but I always felt measured, like I had been allowed inside, but only if I didn't track mud on the floor. Marissa didn't make me feel that way. She made me feel wanted, familiar, chosen. That night, I made the worst decision of my life. And afterward, while Marissa slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling of her apartment and felt 2 things at once. Guilt so heavy I could barely breathe, and a terrible, selfish thrill. I felt alive. That was the lie temptation sold me. It wasn't love. It wasn't destiny. It wasn't some grand, unfinished romance. It was escape, and I mistook escape for truth. The affair lasted 6 weeks. 6 weeks of late meetings, last-minute client dinners, calls I stepped outside to take, passwords changed, phone face down on tables. 6 weeks of becoming a stranger to myself. Marissa never asked me to leave Claire. Not at first. She was careful that way. She knew if she pushed too hard, I'd run. But little by little, she started saying things. "You're not happy, Danny. You deserve to be wanted. Claire doesn't know you like I do." And the most dangerous one, "We make sense." I wanted to believe that. Because if Marissa and I made sense, then maybe I wasn't just a selfish husband cheating on a good woman. Maybe I was a man rediscovering his true self. People will tell themselves almost anything to avoid looking in the mirror. At home, Claire grew quieter. She stopped asking about work, stopped reaching for my hand in church, stopped telling me little stories from her day. She moved around me gently, like I was a bruise she didn't want to press. One night, I came home after 11. The house was dark except for the lamp in the living room. Claire was sitting on the couch. No TV, no book, just sitting. My stomach dropped. "Hey," I said, "you're still up?" She looked at me, and I saw something in her face I hadn't seen before. Not anger, grief. "Where were you?" she asked. "At work," I said automatically. She nodded slowly. "Daniel," she said, "please don't lie to me tonight." My mouth went dry. She held up my tablet. I had forgotten it at home. My messages were synced. That was how she found out. Not lipstick on a collar, not a hotel receipt, not some dramatic movie moment. A tablet on the kitchen counter. A thread of messages I had been too careless, or maybe too arrogant, to hide. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "How long?" I wanted to minimize it. Explain it. Dress it up in pain and loneliness and unmet needs. But looking at her face, I couldn't. 6 weeks, I said. Claire closed her eyes. It would have been easier if she screamed, but she didn't. She just pressed a hand over her mouth like she was holding herself together by force. "Do you love her?" she asked. I didn't answer fast enough. That was an answer all by itself. She stood up, and for the first time since I had known her, Claire looked at me like I was someone she needed to protect herself from. "I want you to leave," she said. "Claire." "No," her voice broke, but she didn't raise it. "You don't get to stand here and make me comfort you." "Not tonight." From the hallway, Eli's bedroom door opened. He stood there holding his stuffed triceratops, sleepy and confused. "Mommy?" he whispered. Claire wiped her face quickly and went to him. I took one step forward, but she turned back. "Don't," she said, one word. And I stopped. I watched my wife pick up our son and carry him back to bed. Then I packed a bag and left the house I had worked so hard to buy. I went to a hotel first, then to Marissa. That's what cowards do. They run toward whatever makes them feel least ashamed. When she opened the door and saw my bag, her eyes widened. "She found out," she said. I nodded. Marissa stepped aside and let me in. For about an hour, I convinced myself this was the beginning of something. Maybe this was the hard part before the happy ending. Maybe Claire and I had been wrong for each other all along. Maybe Marissa was the woman I was supposed to come back to. But real life has a way of stripping fantasy down to bare wood. At 2 a.m, while Marissa slept, my phone lit up. A text from Claire. A photo. Eli asleep in our bed, his little face red from crying. Under it, she wrote, "He asked why Daddy doesn't want to come home." I didn't know what to say. I sat on the edge of Marissa's couch and stared at that picture until my vision blurred. For weeks, I had told myself I was the one suffering. My marriage was cold. My needs were ignored. My wife didn't understand me. My past still haunted me. Me. But in that photo, I saw the truth. My choices had not happened in some private little bubble. They had landed on my son's chest, on my wife's heart, on the home we built. I had not just risked my comfort. I had risked their safety, their trust, their peace. Marissa came out of the bedroom wearing one of my old t-shirts from years ago. She found it in a drawer, I guess. Or maybe she had kept it. "You okay?" she asked. I looked at her, and for the first time since the gas station, I saw her clearly. Not as a fantasy, not as a doorway back to youth, just a woman, flawed, lonely, wanting to be chosen, same as me. "I need to go," I said, her face hardened. "Back to her? Back to my son," she crossed her arms. "And Claire?" I swallowed. "I don't know if she'll take me back. I don't know if she should." Marissa looked away. For a second, I saw the hurt underneath her anger, and I knew I had used her too. Maybe she had tempted me. Maybe she had known exactly what she was doing. But I was the married one. I was the one who made vows. I had no right to blame her for opening a door I willingly walked through. "I'm sorry," I said. She laughed once, bitterly. "You always leave when things get real, Danny." Maybe she was right. But that night, for the first time in a long time, I didn't run toward desire. I ran toward responsibility. Claire did not let me move back in. I showed up the next morning with bloodshot eyes, wearing the same clothes from the night before. She opened the door only because Eli saw me through the window and started yelling, "Daddy!" I knelt on the porch and hugged him so tightly he squirmed. "Can you come home now?" he asked. I looked over his shoulder at Claire. Her face was pale. Her eyes were swollen. "I'm going to try," I said, and my voice cracked. "If Mommy lets me try?" Claire looked at me for a long time. Then she said, "You can take him to breakfast. Be back by 10. That was all. No embrace, no forgiveness, no promise. Just a 2-hour window with my son." And I deserved no more than that. I took Eli to Waffle House because he loved watching the cooks. He talked about dinosaurs and syrup and whether pterodactyls could beat dragons. I nodded and smiled and answered him, but inside, I was breaking. At one point, he reached across the table and touched my wedding ring. "Are you still married to Mommy?" he asked. I didn't know how to answer. "Yes," I said carefully. "But Daddy hurt Mommy very badly." His little forehead wrinkled. "Did you say sorry?" I laughed, but it came out like a sob. "I did. Then you have to not do it again, he said, like the solution was obvious. Children can cut through a lifetime of excuses with one sentence. I know, buddy, I said. I know. The next months were the hardest of my life. Not because Claire punished me, because she didn't. She simply refused to make my repair work easier. She hired a lawyer. Not to file immediately, but to understand her options. She made me move into a small apartment across town. We arranged custody days with Eli. I saw him 4 evenings a week and every Saturday morning. Claire agreed to marriage counseling after I begged, but she made one thing clear. I'm not promising reconciliation, she said. I'm promising honesty. That's all I have left. So we sat in a counselor's office every Thursday evening beneath a framed print of a lighthouse and told the truth one painful piece at a time. At first, I talked about loneliness, about feeling unwanted, about not fitting into her world. Claire listened, hands folded in her lap. Then one evening, about a month into counseling, she looked at me with a kind of sadness I had no defense against. You keep talking about how alone you felt, she said. I nodded carefully. She looked down at her hands. Do you remember the week you said you had that late meeting in Brentwood? The one that ran until almost 10? My stomach tightened because there had been so many lies by then. I didn't know which one she meant. I think so, I said. Claire's lips trembled. I found a lump in my breast that week. The room went silent. Even the counselor, a calm woman named Dr. Patterson, seemed to hold her breath. Claire kept her eyes on her lap. I didn't tell you at first because I thought maybe I was overreacting. Then my doctor wanted imaging, and after that they wanted a biopsy. I called you from the parking lot of the clinic. You said you couldn't talk because you were walking into a late meeting. My throat closed. I remembered the call. I remembered stepping out onto Marissa's balcony with a drink in my hand, seeing Claire's name on my screen, and feeling annoyed because I was afraid she'd hear music in the background. I had answered quickly. Hey, babe, I'm about to walk into a meeting. Everything okay? She had paused. Then she said, Yeah, it can wait. And I had let it wait. Claire looked up at me then, and there was no anger in her face. That made it worse. I went to the biopsy alone, she said. I sat in that little room with the paper gown and the cold table and the nurse asking if someone was waiting for me. I said my husband was working. Her voice broke. And you were with her. I couldn't speak. I had thought I understood the damage I caused. I hadn't. Claire wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. It was benign, she whispered. Thank God. But for 3 days, Daniel, I thought I might have cancer. I imagined telling Eli. I imagined chemo. I imagined losing my hair. I imagined not seeing my son grow up. And the whole time, you were telling another woman how alive she made you feel. Something inside me collapsed. There are apologies that feel necessary. And there are apologies that feel useless because they are too small for the wound. I'm sorry, I said, but the words came out broken and thin. Claire turned toward the window. I know you are, she said, but I don't know what to do with that. Neither did I. That night, I sat in my truck outside my apartment for almost an hour before going in. I thought about Claire in that clinic alone, her hands cold, her wedding ring on, telling a nurse her husband was working because that was easier than admitting her husband had become a stranger. I had wanted to feel alive, and while I was chasing that feeling, my wife had been sitting alone with the possibility of death. There is shame that makes you want to disappear, and then there is shame that finally makes you stop hiding. I ended all contact with Marissa after that session. Not a dramatic goodbye, not one last conversation for closure, just a message. I'm sorry for the pain I caused. I can't continue any contact. I hope you find peace. Then I blocked her number. For 2 days, I felt a strange kind of relief. Not peace exactly, but the first breath a drowning man takes when he finally stops fighting the water. Claire and I kept going to counseling. She didn't soften all at once, but there were moments when she looked at me and didn't seem quite so far away. Once, after a session, she let me walk her to her car. Another time, she texted me a picture Eli had drawn of the three of us under a crooked yellow sun. It was fragile, so fragile I was afraid to name it. Then Marissa found a way to hurt her one more time. It happened on a Sunday afternoon. I had taken Eli to the park, and when I dropped him back at the house, Claire was standing in the doorway with her phone in her hand. Her face was white, not pale, white. "Claire?" I said. She looked at me like I had just betrayed her all over again. "What did she send you?" I asked, though I already knew. Claire turned the phone toward me. Screenshots. Dozens of them. My messages to Marissa. The worst ones. The ones full of longing and stupidity and self-pity. The ones where I had said things like, "You're the only one who really knows me. And sometimes I wonder if I married the life I wanted instead of the woman I loved." Messages I had written in a fever and now wished I could carve out of history with my bare hands. Then, underneath all those screenshots, one cruel line from Marissa. "He only came back because Eli cried." Claire's hand shook. "Is that true?" she asked. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out, because the honest answer was complicated, and pain doesn't have patience for complicated. Eli had been the first thing that cut through the fantasy. That was true. His crying face in that photo had shattered me, but it was not the whole truth. I came back because I saw what I had done. I came back because my wife and son were not props in my story. I came back because I finally understood that the man I had become was destroying the people he claimed to love. But Claire didn't need a speech in that moment. She needed safety, and I had none to offer except the truth. "Eli's pain woke me up," I said quietly, "but I did not come back only because of him. I came back because what I did to you was wrong. Because I love you. Because I was selfish and cowardly and I wanted what felt good more than I protected what was good." Claire laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "You told her I didn't know you." "I know." "You told her she made you feel alive." "I know." "You told her things you never told me." Tears filled her eyes. "Daniel, every time I think I've found the bottom of this, the floor drops again." "I'm sorry," I said. She stepped back into the house. "I can't look at you right now." The door closed, and I stood there on the porch, hearing Eli inside asking, "Mommy, why are you crying?" and knowing I had no one to blame. That night, I didn't call Marissa. I didn't unblock her. I didn't send some angry message demanding she leave Claire alone. I wanted to. God help me, I wanted to. But Dr. Patterson had told me something that stuck. Every time you chase the chaos, you abandon the repair. So I didn't chase the chaos. I emailed Claire a short message instead. "I am so sorry she sent those to you. I will not contact her. I will not defend the messages. They were mine. I wrote them. I own them. I will answer anything you ask whenever you are ready." Then I shut my laptop and sat in the quiet. For weeks after that, Claire pulled back. Counseling became harder. She barely spoke to me outside of logistics about Eli. The little progress I thought we had made seemed gone. And then came her father. Claire's father, Robert Whitaker, was a powerful man in that polished, old South way that never had to raise its voice. He owned car dealerships from Murfreesboro to Bowling Green. He knew bankers, judges, pastors, attorneys, and half the men who sat on boards around Nashville. He had never liked me much. He tolerated me because Claire loved me and because I had made enough money to seem respectable. After the affair came out, he stopped pretending. I found out first at work. My boss, Jim Hollis, called me into his office on a gray Tuesday morning. Jim was usually friendly in that back-slapping commercial real estate way, always talking Titans, football, and golf scores. That morning, he wouldn't quite meet my eyes. "Daniel," he said, "we've had some concerns come up." "What kind of concerns?" He sighed and folded his hands on his desk. "Some of our long-term relationships are uncomfortable right now." I stared at him. "You mean Robert Whitaker?" Jim didn't answer, which was answer enough. Robert had investors tied into developments my firm wanted. He had friends on county boards. He could make calls that didn't sound like threats but had the weight of them. Within 2 weeks, I was taken off 2 major accounts. Then I was told my role was being reevaluated. Then Jim suggested, very gently, that I might want to consider other opportunities before things became uncomfortable. I drove straight from that meeting to Robert's office. His dealership in Franklin looked more like a country club than a place that sold trucks. Glass walls, leather chairs, fresh coffee, framed photos of Robert shaking hands with governors and football coaches. He agreed to see me because men like him enjoy being able to say they were civil. He sat behind his desk in a crisp white shirt, his silver hair perfectly combed. "Daniel," he said, "what can I do for you? You know what this is about," he leaned back. "I know many things are about consequences. You're pressuring my employer. I've simply expressed concern about your judgment." "My judgment at home has nothing to do with my work." Robert's eyes hardened. "A man who lies to his wife while she sits alone in a cancer clinic doesn't get to lecture me on compartments." The words hit like a fist, so Claire had told him. Or maybe her mother had. Either way, there was no defense. Robert opened a drawer and took out a folder. "I'm going to be plain with you," he said. "Claire is exhausted. She is vulnerable. She is still trying to do the decent thing because that's who she is. But I will not stand by while you drag her through more pain." "What is that?" I asked, looking at the folder. "A proposed custody and separation agreement." My jaw tightened. "We haven't decided on divorce." "You may not have. I'm looking at reality." He pushed the folder across the desk. "I've told Claire I will pay whatever it takes if she wants to fight for primary custody. The best attorney in Nashville. Evaluators, depositions, whatever is necessary." I felt heat rise in my face. "You're threatening to take my son from me." "I'm protecting my grandson. He is my son, and you walked out on him." I made a terrible mistake. Robert leaned forward. "No, Daniel. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. You carried on an affair while my daughter thought she might have cancer. You lied to your family. You destabilized your home. And now you want everyone to applaud because you feel bad about it. I wanted to hate him. Part of me did. But another part of me knew he was saying things Claire had been too wounded to say that bluntly." He tapped the folder. "The agreement gives Claire the house for now. Eli stays in his school, his routine, his bedroom. You have set parenting time, generous enough if you're serious about being his father. No surprise overnights. No introducing him to anyone you date. No using him as a messenger. Financial support clearly outlined." I flipped open the folder with shaking hands. It was painful. Not unfair exactly, but painful. It made me smaller than I wanted to feel. It took away the illusion that I could control the story. It put Eli's stability above my pride. Robert watched me. "You can fight," he said. "And if you do, I'll make sure Claire has every resource she needs. You might win more time. You might protect your ego. You might even prove some point about father's rights and fairness. But Eli will be in the middle of it." I looked at the agreement, then at Robert. "You're trying to ruin my career and buy my son away from me." His expression didn't change. "I'm trying to make sure that for once, someone in this situation puts the child first." I left without signing. For 3 days, I burned with anger. I called an attorney. I drafted speeches in my head. I imagined confronting Robert, suing somebody, forcing my employer to admit what was happening. I told myself I had rights. I told myself I was being punished enough. I told myself I was still Eli's father, and nobody got to reduce me to weekend hours and child support. All of that was true. But it wasn't the whole truth. The whole truth was this: Eli had already lost enough safety because of me. If I turned the next year of his life into a war just to prove I could not be pushed around, I would be doing the same thing I had done during the affair, putting my feelings first and calling it justice. So I signed. Not the first version. My attorney helped adjust some language so I wasn't surrendering my role as Eli's father. Claire's attorney agreed. Robert hated that, which gave me a small, petty satisfaction I'm not proud of. But I signed the heart of it. Eli stayed in the house. His routine stayed steady. Claire had space. I had scheduled time, financial obligations, and no room for games. When I brought the signed agreement to Claire, she stood in the kitchen where our life used to feel ordinary. She read the pages slowly. Then she looked up. "My father pressured you." "Yes. I didn't ask him to go after your job." "I know." Her eyes searched mine. "Then why sign?" I swallowed. "Because Eli shouldn't have to pay for my pride, too." For a moment, she said nothing. Then her eyes filled, and she looked down at the papers again. "That's the first thing you've done that actually feels like love," she whispered. I lost that job 3 weeks later. Officially, it was a strategic restructuring. Unofficially, everybody knew. A year earlier, losing that job would have destroyed me. My title, my income, my status. Those things had been the armor I wore to prove I was not the scared poor kid from East Nashville anymore. But when the armor fell off, I discovered something strange. I was still there. Bruised, ashamed, unemployed, but still there. I took a smaller job with a property management company. Less money, less glamour, fewer steakhouse meetings, more time to pick up Eli from preschool. At first, I hated the pay cut. Then I realized I knew Eli's teachers' names for the first time. I knew which playground slides scared him. I knew he liked his peanut butter sandwiches cut into triangles, not squares. I knew the song he wanted in the car when he was sad. I had spent years providing for my family without being truly present in it. Now presence was the only currency I had left. I went to individual therapy. I joined a men's group at church. Not the kind where everybody pretends to have perfect families, but one where men told the truth about divorce papers, addictions, anger, loneliness, and the wreckage pride can leave behind. I learned to say words that used to feel impossible. I was wrong. I was selfish. I am afraid. I need help, at first. Claire didn't seem impressed. And why would she? Grand gestures are easy. Changed behavior is boring and slow. So I did boring and slow. I showed up on time. I answered every question she asked, even when it humiliated me. I gave her access to my phone without demanding credit for it. I stopped working late unless it was absolutely necessary. I packed lunches. I sat in tiny chairs at preschool parent night. I took Eli to swim lessons and didn't check email once. And slowly, something shifted. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe the faintest sign that the ground beneath us wasn't completely dead. The turning point came almost a year after Claire found the messages. It was Eli's 5th birthday. Claire and I had agreed to host the party together at a park near our old house. There were balloons, cupcakes, a rented bounce house, and a dozen screaming children high on frosting. I arrived early to set up tables. Claire was already there, struggling with a banner that said, "Roar! Eli is 5!" The wind kept twisting it around the pavilion post. "Here," I said. "Let me help." For a moment, we stood side by side, tying the banner string. Her shoulder brushed mine. A year earlier, I would have turned that into something. A sign. A possibility. A selfish little hope. This time, I just tied the knot and stepped back. "Looks good," I said. Claire looked at me. "You've changed," she said quietly. My throat tightened. "I'm trying." "I know," she said. That's why I noticed. It was the kindest thing she had said to me in a year. Later, after the party, Eli fell asleep in the back seat of Claire's car, clutching a plastic stegosaurus. We stood in the parking lot as the sun went down behind the trees. Claire leaned against the car and crossed her arms. "I don't know if I can love you the same way again," she said. I nodded. "I understand, but I don't think I want to spend the rest of my life making decisions from pain." I held my breath. She looked toward Eli in the car. "He deserves parents who are whole, whether together or apart." "Yes," I said. "And I deserve a husband who chooses me when it's hard, not just when it's easy." "You do." She studied my face. "Do you still want this marriage, Daniel? Not the house, not the image, not because divorce is embarrassing. Do you want me?" For once, I didn't answer quickly. I thought about Claire in the kitchen making dinner after long days. Claire crying in that counselor's office. Claire sitting alone in a clinic with a paper gown around her shoulders. Claire carrying Eli down the hall while I stood there useless with my overnight bag. Claire reading those screenshots and breaking all over again. Claire giving me honesty when I deserved silence. I want you, I said. But more than that, I want to become someone safe for you. Even if it's too late, her eyes filled. Then she said, maybe we start there. That was 3 years ago. Claire and I are still married. But I won't pretend we got some easy, movie-style ending. Trust did not return like a light switch. It came back like spring after a brutal winter. Slowly, unevenly, one small green thing at a time. There were nights she cried for no obvious reason, and I learned not to defend myself. There were days I hated the man I had been, and she learned not to carry the job of comforting me. There were conversations that reopened old wounds. There were moments we wondered if staying was bravery or denial. But we kept telling the truth. We built something different from what we had before. Less polished. More honest. Claire went back to school part-time for counseling, something she had wanted to do before life convinced her to be practical. I stayed in the lower-paying job longer than I expected because it gave me evenings at home, then eventually started a small consulting business that let me control my schedule. We sold the big house and bought a smaller one closer to Eli's school, with a front porch and a backyard just big enough for a swing set. My in-laws weren't thrilled at first. Robert and I may never be close. There are some rooms a man can't just walk back into because he says he's sorry. But one Saturday morning, about 6 months after we moved, Robert came by to drop off a bike he had bought Eli. I was in the driveway, fixing a loose training wheel on the old one. He stood there watching me for a minute. Then he said, "Claire says you're doing right by them." I tightened the bolt and looked up. "I'm trying," he nodded once. "Not forgiveness, but maybe the smallest crack in the wall." "I expect you to keep trying," he said. "I will." That was all. For men like Robert, that was practically a hug. As for Marissa, I heard through an old friend that she moved to Atlanta and opened a hair studio. I hope she's happy. I mean that. She was part of my past, but she was never the answer to my future. The truth is, I didn't almost lose my marriage because of Marissa. I almost lost it because I refused to face myself, because I confused desire with love, because I thought being wanted was the same as being known, because I believed providing for my family gave me permission to neglect them emotionally, and because when my marriage became painful, I looked for an exit instead of a doorway back in. Last month, Eli turned 8. He's taller now, missing one front tooth, and obsessed with baseball instead of dinosaurs. After his Little League game, we came home and grilled burgers in the backyard. Claire stood beside me on the porch while Eli practiced pitching against a net. The evening was warm, cicadas buzzing, neighbors mowing lawns. That ordinary American music of summer. Claire slipped her hand into mine. It was such a simple thing, a hand in mine. But I knew what it had cost her to offer it again. I squeezed gently. She looked at me and smiled. Not the polite smile she used to wear when she was disappearing, but a real one. Tired, imperfect, alive. From the yard, Eli shouted, "Dad!" "Watch this one." "I'm watching," I called back, and I was. I was finally watching. Not my phone, not the road behind me, not some fantasy of who I used to be. I was watching my son, my wife, my life, the one I had nearly burned down. The one grace allowed me to help rebuild. And I understood something I wish I had learned sooner. A good life is not proven by how strongly you desire what you don't have. It's proven by how faithfully you care for what's already in your hands. Because sometimes the dream life isn't the one that makes you feel young again. Sometimes it's the one waiting at home, asking you to grow up.